The file said the rescue would be simple. I want to begin there, because everything that came after depends on you understanding how certain I was. I am Urun, third-rank survey officer of the Satorai, and I had been assigned to the Earth file for 2 cycles before I ever came near the planet. I knew it the way you know a thing from documents. Temperate, organized. A small, young species with reasonable technology and a stable history. No recent collapse, no signs of the violence that gets a world flagged for caution. The classification committee had marked it class mild, biological threat minimal, habitation difficulty low. It was, by every measure my people use, an easy world. I should explain something about my people because it matters to what I got wrong. The Sadaare evolved on a world that does not turn. One face holds always to our small red sun, and the other face holds always to the dark, and between them runs a narrow band of livable land where my ancestors built everything we are. We have water. We have a great deal of it, but our water does not move. On the day side it is locked beneath ice that never melts, and on the cold side it is locked beneath ice that has never once cracked in the whole history of our records. The liquid water we use sits in deep still basins, fed slowly from below, flat as polished stone. A Sadarai child can stand at the edge of our largest sea and watch it for a full day and never see it change. We do not have a word in our oldest language for a wave. We borrowed one later from a species that did. We thought we understood what we were borrowing. So when I read that Earth's surface was 71% water, I did not feel what a human would feel reading that. I pictured stillness. I pictured a great calm mirror wrapped around a small blue world, reflecting its sun back into space. The survey instruments supported the picture. From orbit, the ocean reads as a flat, stable, low-energy surface. It does not register as a threat environment, because our instruments were built by a people who had never imagined that water could be a threat at all. The distress signature came in during my watch. It was faint, and it was far to the south, near the bottom of the planet where the land runs out and there is nothing but open water all the way around the world. A small vessel, human-built, transmitting an automated signal that our systems read as a mayday. The signature was sitting inside a weather formation that our instruments flagged as a low-pressure cell of unusual size. I remember looking at the readout and feeling something close to pity. A primitive boat, caught in bad weather, at the edge of the most isolated water on its planet, sending out a call that no one was close enough to answer. No one except us. I brought the case to Haluk, my senior officer, and she agreed without hesitation. This was the kind of thing the Survey Corps existed to do. First contact under benign circumstances, a humanitarian act, a chance to show a young species that the wider universe contained things that would help them. We would descend, locate the vessel, evacuate the crew, and return them safely to the nearest land. A clean, simple rescue. The kind of operation that looks very good in a report. I requested a survival assessment from the shuttle before we launched. The system processed the weather data and the vessel's position and returned a figure. Survival probability for the vessel's crew without intervention, 19%. I read that number and I felt the weight of it settle on me, the way responsibility settles when you are the one who can act and no one else can. 19%. They were going to die out there in the cold and the dark unless we went and got them. I told Haluk we would launch at once. I had no idea then that the number was the first of many, and that every one of them would turn out to be wrong in the same direction, and that by the time I understood why, I would be the one in the water. We dropped through the atmosphere on the night side of the planet, over the Southern Ocean, and the first thing I noticed was that I could not find the surface. This confused me. The instruments said we were 2,000 meters above sea level and descending, but when I looked through the forward viewport, I could not tell where the air ended and the water began. There was no flat mirror. There was no stable surface. There was a churning gray-black confusion that heaved and tore and threw itself upward in shapes I had no name for, lit in flashes by the lightning in the cloud above it, and I sat there for several seconds genuinely unable to parse what I was seeing. "Haluk," I said, "what is the water doing?" She was quiet for a moment, then she said, "I do not know." Neither of us had ever seen water do anything. On our world it does not do. It simply is. And here was an entire ocean that would not hold still, that rose in ridges taller than buildings and collapsed and rose again, endlessly, in every direction to the horizon. And I understood in a slow and unpleasant way that the calm blue mirror I had pictured for 2 cycles did not exist and had never existed. The shuttle's voice spoke into the cabin. "Wind speed at current altitude, 140 kilometers per hour. Surface wave height, estimated 11 to 14 meters. Recommend immediate ascent." I did not order the ascent. I told myself it was because the vessel's crew needed us. That was true, but part of it, I will be honest, was that I could not stop looking. We found the boat by its signal. It was small. Smaller than I had expected, perhaps 15 meters, an orange and blue hull riding the storm in a way that made no sense to me. It did not fight the water. It went up the front of each great moving ridge and over the top and down the back, again and again, and it should have been destroyed 100 times over, and it simply was not. There were lights on it. There were figures moving on its deck, in the dark, in the wind, secured by lines, doing something deliberate and coordinated that I could not interpret. I opened a communication channel. Our translators had a working model of the primary human languages from the survey data, and I addressed them on the emergency band. "Human vessel," I said, "we have received your distress signal. We are here to evacuate you. Please prepare your crew for retrieval." There was a pause. The wind screamed across our hull. Then a voice came back, and it was calm. That was the thing that struck me first, before I understood anything else. The voice was calm, and under the calm there was something I would later learn to recognize as the particular dryness of a person who is very busy and has just been interrupted by something strange. "Say again," the voice said. "Who's evacuating who?" "We are here to rescue you," I said. "Your survival probability is critically low. Please prepare for retrieval." Another pause. "Mate," the voice said, "we're the rescue." I looked at Haluk. Haluk looked at me. "Repeat your last," I said. "We're the lifeboat," the voice said, and now I could hear in the background other voices and the sound of machinery, and under it all the enormous breathing roar of the sea. "There's a cargo vessel gone down on its engines about 4 miles south of us, taking water, 22 souls aboard. That's the mayday you've got. We're on our way to them. Are you able to assist, or are you in difficulty yourselves? Because if you're in difficulty, get yourself up high and clear and let us work." I did not have a response prepared for this. Nothing in my 2 cycles of studying the Earth file had prepared me for it. I had come down through the worst water I had ever seen to rescue a doomed crew of primitives, and the doomed crew of primitives had just asked, with some concern, whether I needed help. "Survival probability for this vessel," the shuttle said quietly, recalculated with current heading, 14%. They were not running from the storm. They were driving deeper into it, on purpose, to reach someone else. "We are able to assist," I said. My own voice sounded strange to me. "Please advise how." "Stay clear and keep your lights on so we don't run into you," the voice said. "Name's Tom Brennan, I'm the coxswain. You can follow us in if you've got the stomach for it, but you do what we say out here. Understood?" "Understood," I said. "Good," said Tom Brennan, "then keep up." I learned what they were over the next 2 hours, in pieces, between the waves. I brought our shuttle down low and held station off the lifeboat's flank, matching its impossible motion as best our systems could, and I kept the channel open and I asked questions. I am a survey officer. Asking questions is what I am for. And Tom Brennan, who was steering a 15-meter boat through 14-meter water toward a sinking ship, answered them, because I think it helped him to talk, and because I think he had decided, somewhere in the first few minutes, that explaining his world to a confused alien was simply one more thing the night was asking of him. They were not soldiers. That was the first thing I had to discard. I had assumed when I learned they had come on purpose that they must be some kind of military force, trained and equipped and ordered into danger. They were not. They were volunteers. Tom Brennan, the coxswain, repaired boat engines for a living and had a wife and 2 children asleep in a small house in the port town behind us. Eiley Ross, who handled the lines, was a marine mechanic. Davy Munro drove a delivery lorry. Priya Sharma, the youngest, the newest, had been with the crew for less than a year and worked the rest of her week in a pharmacy. Ordinary people. People with day jobs and warm houses and reasons to stay home. And when the call had come in that evening, a cargo ship foundering in the Drake Passage, the stretch of water at the bottom of their world that they spoke of, I came to understand with a particular grim respect the way my people speak of the deep ice. These ordinary people had left their warm houses, in the dark, in the worst weather their region produces, and launched a small boat into it. Not because anyone made them. Not because they were paid well. They were barely paid at all. They had done it because somewhere out there, 22 people they had never met were going to drown, and the lifeboat crew had decided that this was not acceptable. Why? I asked Tom Brennan. I asked it plainly because I did not understand. Why do you go? He was quiet for a moment, working the wheel, taking the boat up the face of a wave that rose over us both like a moving cliff. Because they're out there, he said. Then we went over the top and down the back, and the conversation stopped while everyone aboard the lifeboat held on, and when we came level again he said, "That's the whole of it, really. They're out there and we can go, so we go. You don't leave people in the water, doesn't matter who they are, doesn't matter how they ended up there." A pause. Nobody gets left in the water. That's the only rule that matters out here. Survival probability, the shuttle said, current heading, cargo vessel reached, 11%. I read the number. I looked at the orange and blue boat punching through the storm beside us. I did not say the number aloud. I had begun, by then, to feel that the number was measuring the wrong thing. I asked Eiley Ross when she took the radio for a stretch whether she was afraid. She laughed. It was a short laugh and not a dismissive one. "Course I'm afraid," she said. "Anybody tells you they're not afraid out here is either lying or an idiot, and I don't want either of them on my boat. You're afraid the whole time. You just don't let it drive." "Then how do you continue?" I asked. "You've got a job," she said simply. "The fear's there and the job's there, and you do the job. The first one's worse than the rest. After your first one you know you can do it scared. That's the secret. Nobody's brave out here. We're all just scared people who turned up anyway." I had no equivalent for this in my culture. We are not a fearful people, the Sodirs, because we evolved on a world that does not threaten us. Our great virtue is patience, the long stillness, the capacity to wait out the slow turning of deep time. We had never needed the particular courage of the small, frightened person who goes anyway, because nothing on our world had ever asked it of us. I sat in my shuttle, watching a pharmacy worker and a lorry driver hold their fear in one hand and their work in the other, and I felt the assessment in my file beginning to come apart. Priya Sharma, the youngest, told me this was her 3rd launch. She told me her hand still shook every time. She told me that on her first launch she had been so frightened she could not speak, and that Tom Brennan had put her on the lines next to Eiley and said nothing about her silence, and that they had brought 4 people off a fishing boat that night, and that one of them had been a girl her own age, and that the girl had held on to her and would not let go, and that she had understood in that moment exactly why she had come. "I could have stayed home," Priya said. "Every time I could stay home, warm bed, nobody'd think less of me. But then I'd know there was a boat going out without me and somebody in the water and I'd be home." She was quiet for a moment. "I couldn't live like that, so I get on the boat, hands shaking the whole way." The shuttle updated the probability. I had stopped listening to it as a measure of whether they would survive. I had begun to hear it as a measure of how much they were willing to spend. The rogue wave came at the worst possible moment, which is, I have since learned, when rogue waves tend to come. We had reached the cargo ship. It was a wounded thing. A great rust-streaked hull lying low and wrong in the water, its engines dead, listing as the sea poured into it through a breach below the waterline. There were lights along its rail and figures crowded at them, 22 people who had been waiting in the dark and the cold, and the noise for the small chance that anyone would come, and who now watched the small chance arrive in the form of a 15-meter orange boat that should not have been able to reach them and somehow had. What followed I can only partly describe because I did not have the framework to understand it as it happened. The lifeboat crew brought their boat in against the hull of the dying ship, in water that was throwing both vessels around like debris, and they began to take people off. It was brutal. It was precise. Tom Brennan held the boat in position by reading the sea in a way I could not perceive, anticipating each wave, using the rise and fall of the water to bring the deck close at the exact instant a person could be pulled across. Eiley and Davy caught them. Priya secured them. One at a time, in the dark, in the wind, 22 strangers were dragged from a sinking ship onto a lifeboat that was already overloaded, and not one of them was dropped. I watched it the way you watch something you will spend the rest of your life trying to explain. These were not the helpless primitives of my file. These were the most competent beings I had ever seen, operating at the absolute limit of what a body can do in an environment that wanted them dead, and they were winning. Not easily, not safely, but they were winning, person by person, against the wrath of an entire ocean. I had brought the shuttle in close to provide light. That was my error. I wanted to help, and the only thing I knew how to do was hold position and put our lamps on the water so the crew could see. I brought us in low, between the storm and the boats, and I was concentrating so hard on holding station that I did not see the wave until the shuttle's voice spoke. Warning, it said, anomalous wave, impact in. It did not finish. I have tried since to describe the size of it, and I have failed every time. It was not a wave like the others. It was the sea standing up. It rose out of the dark behind the cargo ship, taller than the ship, taller than anything, a moving wall of black water with the storm light shattering along its crest, and it came down on us, and the world ended. The shuttle was not built for this. Nothing my people have ever built was built for this, because we never imagined an enemy made of water. The wave took us and threw us, and the hull breached, and the cold came in. The cold I had no word for. Water moving with the force of a collapsing mountain. And I remember the shuttle's voice saying something, and I remember Halleck's hand on my arm. And then I remember the dark and the cold and the absolute certainty that this was the end. That I had come down to an easy world to perform a simple rescue, and the easy world had simply reached up and taken me. Survival probability, the shuttle said, and its voice was failing, the systems drowning around me, survival probability. It did not give a number. For the first time since we had launched, it did not give a number, and I understood that the number was 0, that there was no probability left to calculate, that I was a Sodiris survey officer dying in moving water at the bottom of an alien world. And then through the breach, through the dark and the freezing chaos, I saw a light. It was orange and blue. The lifeboat had turned back. I want you to understand what that meant, because I did not understand it until I was inside it. The lifeboat was overloaded. It had 22 rescued souls aboard and a crew of 4, in the worst water on the planet, and it had a clear run to safety, and the only thing between it and that safety was open ocean. Turning back meant taking that overloaded boat into the exact place the rogue wave had come from. It meant risking 26 lives that were already saved to reach 2 lives that were, by any reasonable calculation, already lost. There was no reasonable calculation in which they should have come back for us. They came back for us. I felt hands in the water, strong hands, human hands, finding me in the dark and the cold, getting a line around me, hauling me up against the side of the boat and over the rail, and I lay on the deck of the lifeboat gasping in an atmosphere I could barely process, and I heard Tom Brennan's voice, calm, that impossible calm, saying, "That's one. Where's the other one? Eiley, get a light on the water, there's two of them, where's the second?" They found Halleck. They found Halleck 30 meters out, barely conscious, and Davy Munro put a line on himself and went into the water, into that water, on purpose again, and brought her back. And when both of us were aboard and the boat was impossibly overloaded, and the storm was still trying to kill every soul on it, Tom Brennan turned the boat for home and took us all out of the raft together. I lay on the deck of that small boat, surrounded by the people I had come to rescue, and the people they had rescued, and the two of my own crew that they had pulled from a sea that should have kept us. And I looked up at Priya Sharma, the pharmacy worker, the youngest, whose hands were shaking from cold this time, or fear, or both, as she secured a blanket around me, and I asked her the only thing I could think to ask. "Why did you come back? You were safe. You had no reason." She looked at me. Water was running down her face. She was 19% of the way to dead herself, by my shuttle's old arithmetic, and she had been for hours, and she had never once turned away from it. "You were in the water," she said, as though that explained everything. And I understood, finally, that it did. The port was a small place, behind a stone breakwater, and we came into it in the gray light of dawn with the storm finally easing behind us. Word had gone ahead. There were people on the dock, the families of the crew and medical personnel, and others I could not identify, and they took the 22 rescued souls off the cargo ship, and they took Halleck and me, and they did it all with a brisk, practiced, undramatic kindness that I have thought about every day since. No one treated the night as a triumph. That was what astonished me last and most. By my people's reckoning, what these four had done was among the bravest acts I have ever witnessed or recorded. They had gone willingly into the wrath of an entire ocean, against terrible odds for strangers, and then, with no margin left, they had turned back into it again for two beings from another world whom they had met 3 hours earlier and who were not even of their species. On my world, there would be monuments. There were no monuments, there was tea. There were dry blankets and a great deal of strong tea and a quiet shared exhaustion, and Tom Brennan, when the worst of it was done, came and sat near me on the dock with a cup in his hands and said, "You'll mend. Bit of a state, but you'll mend. Your friend too." "You turned the boat around," I said. "You should not have the calculation." "There's no calculation," he said, and it was the same flat, simple voice he had used in the storm. "That's the thing you keep trying to do, and it's the thing that doesn't work out here. You can't do it by the numbers. The numbers tell you to leave people. You don't leave people." He drank his tea. "You were in the water, that's the whole of it. Nobody gets left in the water." I had heard him say it in the storm. I heard it again now in the gray calm of the morning, and I understood that it was not a slogan. It was the entire moral architecture of these people, compressed into 7 words, and they lived inside it so completely that they did not even experience following it as a choice. I went back up to the survey ship that afternoon, and I sat down to revise the Earth file, and I found that I did not know how to begin. The file said class mild. The file said biological threat minimal, habitation difficulty low, and easy world. And every word of it was true in the narrow, instrument-bound way that my people understand the universe, and every word of it had nearly killed me because it measured the wrong things. It measured the surface and called it the truth. It looked at a blue planet from orbit and saw a calm mirror, and it never once imagined that the mirror could rise up taller than a ship and reach for you in the dark. It assessed the humans by their technology and their organization and their pleasant temperate climate, and it never thought to ask the only question that mattered, which was not what is this world, and not even what lives on it, but what has living on this world made these people into. I will tell you what it has made them into, because I put it in the file in those words, and I will not soften it here. The humans live on a world that is, by their own honest reckoning, trying to kill them, and has been for the whole of their history. Most of their planet is moving water that can stand up without warning and take a ship and everyone on it. They have always known this. They knew it before they had instruments, before they had charts, before they had any of the technology that my file had used to assess them and find them mild. They knew the sea was bigger than them and stronger than them, and entirely indifferent to whether they lived or died. And they built boats anyway, and they crossed it anyway. And when, inevitably, the sea took some of them, the others did not retreat to safety and resolve to stay on the land where it was sensible. They did something that I do not believe my own people, for all our patience and our long stillness, would ever have thought to do. They organized to go back in. They built small, fast boats, and they crewed them with volunteers, with lorry drivers and pharmacy workers and engine mechanics, with ordinary frightened people who could have stayed home. And they made a standing promise to the sea that whenever it took someone, anyone of any kind, they would launch into the wrath after them. Not because it was wise. It is not wise. The numbers say leave them. They made a different rule, and they wrote it not in their laws but in something deeper than law, and the rule is that nobody gets left in the water. The wrath of the sea did not make the humans afraid of the sea. It made them brave for each other. That is the thing my people, gazing at our flat, unmoving seas across the whole of our history, never had the chance to learn, and the thing I would never have learned myself if I had not been the one in the water, watching an orange and blue boat turn back into a wave it had every reason to flee. I marked the file with the highest revision flag we have, the one that requires a full reassessment by the Coalition's senior board, and in the summary field, where the original survey had written easy world, low priority, I wrote what I had seen. I wrote, this is not an easy world. This is a world that taught its people the only lesson that matters, by nearly drowning them for 100,000 years, and they learned it. Recommend the highest classification of respect. These are the people who turn the boat around. Haluk read it over my shoulder. She did not say anything for a while. Sadara, I do not always need to. Then she said, the committee will ask what classification you mean. We do not have a category for the people who turn the boat around. I thought about Tom Brennan saying there was no calculation. I thought about Priya Sharma's shaking hands and the blanket she had wrapped around an alien while she was still half frozen herself. I thought about the wave standing up out of the dark, and the orange light coming back through it for me, when there was no reason in the universe for it to come. Then we will have to make one, I said. That seemed right to me. Their world had never fit easily into any category. Neither, I was beginning to understand, did they? The survey ship is leaving Earth's system now. Below us the planet turns, blue and enormous and alive, the great moving oceans glittering in the light of its sun. And from up here, from orbit with the instruments running, it still reads exactly as it did 2 cycles ago. A calm mirror, a low-energy surface, an easy world. I know better now. Somewhere down there in the cold water at the bottom of that world, in a small port behind a stone breakwater, an orange and blue boat sits ready, and the lorry driver and the pharmacy worker and the mechanic and the coxswain are asleep in their warm houses. And the next time the sea takes someone, and it will, because the sea always does, they will get up, and they will be afraid, and they will go anyway. I have stopped trusting the number the shuttle gives me. It measures the wrong thing. It only ever counted the odds against them. It never once counted the chance that someone would come back.